clearly what this budget was about creating a line that every Labor MP and every Labor candidate at one point in time is able to look somebody in the eye who maybe was watching Tipping Point or Farmer Wants a Wife or Home and Away or in compulsory voter land, right? They're not counting the grains of sand on the beach like we do, and I love what we do, but we know that there's an awful lot of people who would prefer to not vote than to be forced to vote. In the end, they turn around and they've got this tax cut for everyone, power cut for every household. Do you think that is as potent as it may seem to be if the lived reality of your life circumstances doesn't actually change?
Look, Paul, I think there's a couple of different points you've made there. So you and I have, over the last few years, enjoyed election nights, and then we've enjoyed talking about what's going to be the poll reaction. So I'm talking about over, the Scott Morrison last few years and ours. And what you've consistently seen is that there's been no, post-budget bump. I mean, maybe 10 years ago, before media splintered in the way it has with social media, that enough people were watching on a given night that they actually absorbed it on the night and felt positive or negative about it. So the first thing to say is that there's been almost no poll bumps for Scott Morrison in his budgets and so far for Albo in his budget. So I'm not expecting any significant poll bump at all. Having said that, I surprisingly, Paul, agreed with a lot of what Bronwyn just had to say. I thought she described it in a way I would have described it. I think that over the last few months, and to some degree in this budget, the government have been cleaning the barnacles off the ship in a way that says, we want to be focused. We want to be talking about Labor issues. One difference I have with the interpretation that Bronwyn had is that Labor's done this because there's Labor values behind this. And so we want to make sure that people understand that a core Labor value is housing, not this fantasy dream, socialist paradise that the Greens talk about, okay? This is a core Labor issue, housing. On energy transition, a core Labor value is to manage the energy transition. So yes, the transition requires gas. Labor has said in the last few weeks, gas is central to the energy transition. The costs issue. So Labor has said we're going to give energy cost relief. But they're core Labor values. The tax cuts.
Oh, Stephen, that is not core Labor values at all. Increased taxation.
Absolutely core
and this is
Labor.
the highest taxing budget in 20 years. This is big tax. And you know that the Labor DNA in the Labor Party, Stephen, is to have government intervention, to have more people dependent on the government so that their own initiative is to respond to what the government wants them to do. And that's exactly what this budget is. It is trying to make more people dependent on what the government wants them to do.
Stephen?
No, I'm going to have to put your secret conspiracy aside there. I mean, I'm going to disagree firstly. That if you go, it is a total conspiracy. Labor wants to hook people onto social security payments or one-off payments. I mean, the big, who masterminded the one-off payments? I'm sorry, but the last coalition government mastered one-off payments, Bronwyn. It was the master of them. So please don't pretend that a one-off payment from Labor is some socialist conspiracy to hook the masses
Stephen, that's
on
got about as much
government dependence. That's exactly
that's about as truthful as your friend, the Treasurer, is saying he's the only one who's been managed to get a
back in black. Yep, he's had two surpluses. You're right. He has got two surpluses.
Yeah, but if you had the same
this one's based off excise.
If you had the same accounting methods in place,
you guys have got
Josh
to agree on which is the criticism. You can't have two different criticisms if they conflict.
Just look at the excise alone. Paul has been talking about the excise, around $15 billion just from tobacco.
Correct.
And you've got another, 16 billion coming in for fuel, which you keep pushing up the tax component. Now, I understand this pea and thimble trick that's going on here, that the Treasurer says if we actually lower the cost of electricity by the $300. That'll come out of the basket of items that are in the CPI basket. So that will be deflationary. That's the argument. But because the tax cuts are going to everybody,
That's what happened last year.
the people will actually spend the money that they're getting in the tax cuts, which is inflationary.
Okay, now I've literally got 2 minutes before we're going to go to Megan Kelly, so speed round for everyone here, if it's possible. Stephen, okay, if the idea is green hydrogen is literally going to become this superpower, will fuel the world like Wi-Fi, the CSIRO came up with, change the world, all of those things. Why doesn't the government not just say, here's your tax credit, but if you take the tax credit, we're going to get parts of the profits if you actually discover, if you actually are able to, for want of a better term, split the atom and change the world? Because it seems to me that the only thing that I resent is I don't want to happen sort of like the Telstra style thing where the taxpayers laid all of the cables and then it became a private company and then the access to the cables meant they could middle finger every other company.
Well, I think you make a good point there, Paul. I'm least comfortable around some of the issues where some of the beneficiaries are some of the wealthiest people. Now, they're putting their own private capital in as well, and others might not be willing to do it. I think you make a fair criticism there. This is not one that excites me. I think there's a range of other issues in the budget that are absolutely worth selling, but they're all part of the path of transition to renewables. Whether this one comes off or not, time will tell. But Labor isn't putting all its eggs in one basket. As
Stephen,
you know, it's got
the only
solar,
reason that gas is now on the agenda is because all the policies of Bowen and therefore Albanese with regard to renewables have failed.
No,
they know that they will not be able to meet their targets.
Madeleine King has consistently, for 2 years...
She's a brave woman, isn't she?
...to win this battle, and
she's a brave
has won
woman.
this battle, and she deserves applause.
Gas for now, green hydrogen later.
Is behind it.
She's been saying you can't meet your targets,
transition.
and she saw reality and belled the cat.
All right, Bronwyn, give me 30 seconds before we're done.
She has been courageous and successful.
The bottom line is that we've got to get rid of this government if we're going to save this nation. We've got nothing but increased cost of living, hiking of interest rates for mortgagees. We have, are you better off than you were before this lot was elected? No, we're not. And all the adjectives and the adverbs that the Treasury uses in his speeches, if you took them all away, it'd take half the time to deliver it. But all the grandiose language in the world is not going to convince the Australian people that they're better off since he got the job.
All right, thank you, gang. Do appreciate it. You can have the next 30 seconds next week, Stephen. Do appreciate it. Thank you, guys. We're always here to help. More carryover champs with these guys next week.